Let's talk now to Ralph Schoellhammer, who's a political theorist at University of Vienna over in Austria. Ralph, great to have you back on the show.
Great to be back, Alex. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm very... Hey, you've got a smart setup today, haven't you? Look at that. You look like a Bond villain. Love it. Let's talk about what's going on. What's going on here, first of all. I mean, Britain, top in the charts. It's been a long time since we won anything, but it's not exactly what we want to be winning, which is apparently the biggest surge in immigration of any rich country last year. That's according to the OECD. A total of 746,900 new permanent-type migrants moved to the UK last year, up from 488,400 in 2022. These are eye-watering figures. What do you think is going on here?
Well, I think the first thing to say is this is exactly what people mean when they talk about the Uni Party, because you have the Tories, you have the Labour Party, but on every issue that matters for the people, they have one opinion and it's diametrically opposed to what the people want. And migration, I think, is just one of many examples. You also mentioned from your previous caller the idea that this is no longer democracy, and I completely agree. It's not just the UK. Look, in the UK, you basically have not a police cracking down on free speech. I mean, what happened to Alison Pearson, you can no longer deny it. Because the point is, if they can get Alison Pearson, they can get Joe Schmo, 36 Elm Street even easier. And that's what they're trying to do. I mean, they're sending a signal to the population. You might have an opinion, but you better keep it to yourself. They broke with the 80-year convention in Austria that the strongest party gets to form the government because they are afraid that the Freedom Party, which is right-wing, could have a say. In Italy, the courts crack down on everything that Meloni tries to do. In Germany, they want to ban the AfD. In France, they are now trying to imprison Le Pen for some weird thing, like they paid too much money to parliamentary assistants in the EU Parliament. I mean, the French scandals, right, where presidents were spying on their lovers that nobody cared, and now you want to ban somebody because they did some wrong bookkeeping. It's precisely what they tried to do to Donald Trump with the so-called hush money case and Stormy Daniels, right? They try everything they can. They want to exclude 51% of the population and those who represent them from decision-making and from the public discourse. And this is a very, very dangerous trend.
Yeah, well, you say they, and you list, a long list of countries there. Want to add Netherlands into the mix. The PVV, of course, they haven't really been allowed to form a government. I'm pretty sure similar things have taken place in Scandinavia, in Sweden and Finland as well. In fact, it's hard to find a country in the Western world where they have been allowed to have a democratically voted for populist leader who wants to do something about immigration. Why? What is going on? Who are they and why are they doing this?
Well, I think the best description of they is the collusion between academia, political parties and the media. And what they want to do is they want to defend the status quo at all costs because they simply cannot, and I think that has also psychological reasons, they cannot admit that they have been wrong on all major issues for the last 30 years. So instead of admitting that they have made mistakes and have to change course, they would rather ban everybody who points towards the problems. That is really, I think, what's going on. They want to, when I say they, I mean those who want to maintain the failing status quo. I mean, every society always has an elite and an establishment. I have no problem with that. But I want an elite, I want an establishment that works for the people. And that's the big difference. This is the reason, and the left is so stupid, if you allow me to say this. They never understood Trump's appeal. They said, how can Trump claim to be a man of the people? He's a billionaire. People don't care that he's a billionaire as long as he's proposing policies that are in their interest. And this is what the left doesn't understand. The people dislike the left not because they're elite. They dislike the left because it's an elite that acts against their interests. It's not that complicated, actually.
Do you think that it is just simply a case that they don't understand people and they don't want to stand corrected either? Because the lengths with which they go to try and stop, let's say, Marine Le Pen or Geert Wilders or Giorgia Meloni, the lengths with which they're prepared to go to with things such as lawfare, with judges sitting in courts overruling decisions taken by governments. And then, of course, here in this country, that sort of permanent spectre of fear that now lives within the prison cells of our minds, which is we're not allowed to talk about this even. That is quite sophisticated. It doesn't seem accidental to me.
Well, it is a sophisticated result of, I would say, generations-long brainwashing that started in the late 1960s. I mean, if you create the condition where you tell everybody who is slightly right of center that they are basically fascists, neo-Nazis, or, you name it, at some point you start believing it. I mean, my suggestion is I would not force this upon your viewers, so just do it in very small doses and an experiment. But read the opinion pages of The Guardian. I mean, 90% of what they write is complete insanity. And, it's things like, well, don't go to the gym because that makes you a right-winger, or that Britain was, in fact, founded by immigrants from Africa. And it's all these, or the BBC, when they do a documentary on medieval Britain, and every second person is of African descent or is of black skin. I mean, it's complete insanity. We're rewriting history in real time, but some people honestly believe this.
Yeah, I always think, I think what's happened is to get up the sort of greasy pole of a career, you have to sort of tug your forelock and go along with the mantra of immigration's great, and, you hate Brexit and all the rest of it, or you won't get on in life. You won't end up in an executive position, or even these days in a position at all. And so I think as a result, people have had to gaslight themselves over so long that they've started to believe it.
Well, they do.
Yeah.
Right. Somebody like I forgot, George Monbiot, right? There are people who honestly believe this stuff. Or even at the Financial Times, you had the Edward Luce and who just told us just real quick. We were all told by 50 Nobel laureate economists that if Trump is coming into office, the world economy will crash. If you look at the stock market right now and the companies, everybody is euphoric about Donald Trump. I mean, they lie to you. Always think, I really want to implore your viewers to this, always think about Southport. They lied to you. For 3 months, they lied to your face. And if you said the truth, and, you went out in the streets, they threatened you with arrest. You were in Britain, you live now in a society where you can be arrested for telling the truth. That is a very dangerous path, and the people responsible for it have to go, one way or another.
I'll tell you what, when I end up in prison, I'll make sure I take my Super Nintendo entertainment system. Right, now let's talk about Poland. They've started a construction of a £1.9 billion East Shield, which is in effect creating a buffer zone with their borders with Russia and Belarus. We saw in times past coachloads of migrants being bussed over by Russia to the borders of Belarus and Poland, rattling the fences, actually creating makeshift weapons to fire at Polish border control. And thankfully, good old Poland said, we're not having any of this, and armed their border control and said, get back. And then I think Donald Tusk has even said, listen, we're going to actually block any new asylum claims from happening in Poland because this is an act of grey zone warfare. Poland really gets Russia, don't they? And as a result now, they are building this East Shield, which is going to have sort of various layers of protections, drone surveillance, weaponry, and so on and so forth. I mean, if Poland gets the game, why is it that we don't?
But Alex, we were told that walls and fences don't work. Don't you remember? We were told that it's impossible. You can't do it. Like if you have a 20-foot wall, somebody will come with a 30-foot ladder. Like this is something that we have been hearing now for decades. Now the polls show, by the way, the Israelis did the same with their wall, that of course fortifications and physical barriers work. I mean, everybody who said they don't is completely insane. It's like saying locking your door doesn't work. I mean, this is, by the way, another part of what we were talking about before. There is just something that comes from the higher ups at the moment that's complete ridiculous, but somehow you feel obliged to believe it or don't speak up against it. It's complete nonsense. And I would say one more thing. It is very odd. Apparently, borders to Russia and Belarus, those are the only borders these days you're allowed to defend. I mean, I'm for a strong defense against Belarus and Russia, but I think I would also be for a strong defense against the border, between Greece and Turkey, between Italy, France, Spain, and the Mediterranean. So it's very odd that it works in one place and it doesn't work in another. And I feel that the reason for this is because the Russians apparently at the moment are the one people that you're allowed to dislike in a way that you're not allowed to dislike other people. I know this sounds harsh, but this appears to me to be European policy at the moment. Right,
no, it's very true, actually. Everyone else is a poor victim and an innocent, but Putin is a bona fide aggressor who we're all allowed to hate. But do you think that even though we've seen this huge upswing in populism taking place, a wave, a tidal wave of it, flooding the Western world, and now finally Trump, Yippity-doo-dah, I say. That's brilliant news. Is this now going to have a ripple effect in policy making, do you think? Because on one hand, there's this optimism that when Maloney got into power, she said she was going to do big stuff, and yet we're waiting for her to do it. And even when she tries to do it, judges in her country and the ECJ are saying to her, you're not allowed to. So what use is it having politicians and presidents and prime ministers who talk tough when there's some sort of shadowy elite who are somehow able to prevent them doing what the people want them to do and what they elected them to do?
No, I think that's a very point, that I would even go a step further. I'm not particularly happy with the term populism for a very simple reason, because with few exceptions, but if you look at the AfD in Germany, for example, I would say the same about Trump in the United States or Le Pen in France. They are popular because of their positions, not because they are wildly charismatic. I mean, okay, Trump is maybe slightly. But, for example, the leadership of the AfD in Germany, these are not particularly charismatic people, but the population, and this is always my most important point, the British people, the German people, the Italian people, they are not mysterious creatures. They actually say very clearly what they expect, which policies they want, and they vote in ever larger numbers for those parties who promise those policies. So the term populist has always this idea that it's somebody who is, deceiving the people, seducing the people. No, it's very simple. The people say, we want, laws that protect us and not somebody else. We want less migration. We want things to work. We want stuff to get done. And whichever party proposes to do this will be voted into office. And at some point, as you correctly point out, they then have to do it. I mean, I will defend Giorgia Meloni a little bit. She's in a coalition government, so she cannot do however she pleases. I think she has more like a gradual approach. And she has the same problem that we have in other parts. The courts basically have become legislators. I mean, just real quick, I'm sure that your viewers know this, but the European Court of Justice or the European Court of Human Rights, one of those two, has recently decided that basically every woman from Afghanistan has an asylum claim. I mean, this is just, these are 19 million people. So you basically say, do you have a blanket right to asylum for 19 million people? I mean, this is all madness that might be somehow legally justified, but you cannot execute it in practice. So either you use these laws and commit societal and cultural suicide, or the second option is that you reject those laws and come up with new ones.
Yeah, well, let's hope. I think all eyes on Meloni and how she's going to fight back against her own judiciary in this matter. And fingers crossed she does. We're all waiting for the one person, the vanguard, who manages to defeat those who don't have Western democratic interests at heart. Ralph Schoellhammer, it's fantastic having you back on the programme.